វត្តតាមកម្មវិធីស្ពានកិច្ចសន្ទនានៅរសៀលថ្ងៃទី21ខែមេសាឆ្នាំ2010នៅសាកលវិទ្យាល័យកម្ពុជាមានរៀបចំកិច្ចសន្ទនាដែលមានការចូលរួមពីសាស្ត្រាចារ្យនិស្សិតក្នុងសាកលវិទ្យាល័យទាំងមូលក្រុមអធិបតីភាពអាយុដំកៅកំហួនទីប្រឹក្សាផ្ទាល់សម្ដេចអគ្គមហាសេនាបតីតេជោហ៊ុនសែនប្រធានសាកលវិទ្យាល័យកម្ពុជាអាយុដំយូសេរ៉ាម៉ូហតតាប្រធានាធិបតីប្រទេសទីម៉ូខាងកើតអាយុដំម៉ារូវ៉េតប្រធានមូលនិធិអន្តរជាតិដើម្បីសន្តិភាពចូលរួមក្នុងឱកាសនោះដែរមានអាយដាមសម្រាប់កំសាន្តទីប្រឹក្សាជាន់ខ្ពស់នៃសាកលវិទ្យាល័យកម្ពុជាភ្ញៀវជាតិនិងអន្តរជាតិតំណាងអង្គទូតប្រចាំកម្ពុជាអាយដាមកៅកំហួនទីប្រឹក្សាសម្ដេចអគ្គមហាសេនាបតីតេជោហ៊ុនសែននាយករដ្ឋមន្ត្រីនៃព្រះរាជាណាចក្រកម្ពុជាប្រធានសាកលវិទ្យាល័យកម្ពុជាបានសង្កត់ធ្ងន់អំពីការរស់នៅក្នុងពិភពលោកតែមួយរួមគ្នាដើម្បីកសាងពិភពលោកមួយដើម្បីស្ថិរភាពសន្តិភាពសន្តិសុខនិងការអភិវឌ្ឍបន្ទាប់មកលោកអ៊ូវេម៉ារ៉ាវ៉េតប្រធានមូលនិធិបានថ្លែងថាមូលនិធិសន្តិភាពអន្តរជាតិមិនមានពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងសាសនាឬនយោបាយឡើយហើយកម្មវិធីស្ពានកិច្ចសន្ទនានេះមានគោលបំណងស្វែងរកសន្តិភាពដោយបំបត្តិអំពើហិង្សាលោកប្រធានបានអំពាវនាវឲ្យមានការចូលរួមគាំទ្រពីមូលនិធិអន្តរជាតិដើម្បីវប្បធម៌ទីក្រុងតូក្យូទូទាំងពិភពលោកផងដែរទន្ទឹមនេះលោកបណ្ឌិតមុនរ៉ូបានថ្លែងអំពីសកម្មភាពនិងការវិវត្តរបស់ប្រទេសទីម៉ូខាងកើតបន្ទាប់ពីទទួលឯករាជ្យពីប្រទេសឥណ្ឌូនេស៊ីដើម្បីទាមទារសិទ្ធិសេរីភាពជូនប្រជាជនខ្លួនវិញដែលជាស្នាដៃរបស់អាយដាមរ៉ាម៉ូសប្រធានាធិបតីទីម៉ូខាងកើតអាយដាមកៅកំហួនបានអញ្ជើញប្រកល់សញ្ញាបត្របណ្ឌិតកិត្តិយសពីសាកលវិទ្យាល័យកម្ពុជាជូនចំពោះអាយដាមយូសេរ៉ាម៉ូសហតតាដែលបានបង្កើតស្នាដៃក្នុងការស្វែងរកសន្តិភាពជូនប្រទេសរបស់ខ្លួននិងរួមចំណែកស្វែងរកសន្តិភាពក្នុងតំបន់និងពិភពលោកលោកយូសេរ៉ាម៉ូសហតតាបានថ្លែងអំពីការតស៊ូដើម្បីស្វែងរកសន្តិភាពដូចជាការចែករំលែកបទពិសោធន៍និងសកម្មភាពរបស់អាយដាមសម្រាប់ថ្ងៃអនាគតនៅវប្បធម៌សន្តិភាពពិតទាំងក្នុងប្រទេសរបស់អាយដាមផ្ទាល់និងក្នុងតំបន់ព្រមទាំងលើសកលលោកទាំងមូលអាយដាមបន្តទៀតថាប្រទេសទីម៉ូខាងកើតកំពុងដាក់សំណើសុំចូលជាសមាជិកប្រជាជាតិអាស៊ីអាគ្នេយ៍ហៅកាត់អាស៊ានឆ្នាំ2012ប៉ុន្តែមានកត្តាមួយចំនួនដែលត្រូវពិនិត្យនិងវិតម្លៃជាមុនសិនជាងនេះទៀតអាយដាមបានលើកឡើងពីបញ្ហាបំរែបំរួលអាកាសធាតុដែលប្រទេសធំៗនិងប្រទេសលើសកលលោកបានចូលប្រជុំដោះស្រាយនៅក្នុងទីក្រុងកូប៉ង់ហាតអាយដាមប្រធានាធិបតីបានធ្វើអត្ថាធិប្បាយលម្អិតទៀតដែលនៅពេលនេះស្ថានីយទូរទស្សន៍អាស៊ីអាគ្នេយ៍សូមផ្សព្វផ្សាយជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសដែលមានខ្លឹមសារទាំងស្រុងដូចតទៅ
So maybe I would try to be more going down to village level to do what to share with you what I do or what each of us do to bring peace to this world. First, I remember a year or so ago in one of the bridges events where I spoke, the theme was "Is lasting peace in the world a realizable dream?" I don't remember exactly what my answer to that particular question, but I think I said I do not believe in our lifetime that peace is realizable in the world. Peace as we understand the holistic concept of peace, because we don't have to go back to before World War II. We stopped at World War II, one of the ugliest, the most shameful chapters in humanity history, when millions of people, only because they were Jews, million others only because they were gypsies, were slaughtered. And that war began in Europe, spread elsewhere to Africa, Asia. Few countries were spared. And then we thought that with the creation of the United Nations, built on the ashes of World War II, the world would be spared another tragedy, other tragedies. But if you look at the statistical data since World War II, tens of millions of people have died in conventional trench warfare or within countries. And to cite few specific examples, and that was not soon after World War II, we had Cambodia, and we had the killing fields in Uganda under Idi Amin, and many other despots in Africa. And then in almost the very heart of Europe in the 90s, a Europe that was the center, the theater of one of the ugliest wars, the ugliest in humanity history, again witnessed another ugly ethnic cleansing in the Balkans. And still ongoing wars based on different motivations are taking place. And because of that, I would answer the question, is peace realizable in our lifetime? I would say probably no. But at the same time, I do not give up on humanity, because there are many instances also throughout these years where human beings have reacted with extraordinary humanity, ongoing great international solidarity towards the people of Haiti. A few years ago, a movement throughout the world, from rich to poor countries, for poor countries to rich countries, in solidarity of the people of Indonesia, particularly Aceh, who suffered the devastating effects of tsunami. And I will share with you how our own people in Timor-Leste, how we reacted to tsunami in Indonesia. At the time, we were, and we are still one of the poorest countries in the world, but still we were not receiving revenues from what we have today, oil and gas. And yet, civil society raised with a matter of days $70,000, and our government contributed with $50,000. And at the time, the then United Nations head of OCHA, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Jan Egeland from Norway, speaking in New York, he said Timor-Leste was the first country to commit and deliver a pledge to the victim of tsunami in Indonesia. And who contributed those donations? In one school, children raised $10. Some, they walked to the bank, bringing chicken, goats, and pigs, because they understood you can contribute anything. That's what we told the people. You can contribute anything you can. So extraordinary show of generosity. So you have these two extremes, where some communities, and I say communities, not only political demagogues who manipulate communities, but actual communities, engage in violence, sometimes totally irrational, but then at the same time you can find this extraordinary generosity. So is peace, lasting peace in the world, realizable in our times? I would say yes, it is possible. It is possible if each of us, in our own communities, in our own homes, in our own countries, we work towards eliminating the root causes of prejudices, of violence. Many of the conflicts that we know in recent history, from the Balkans to Rwanda, stem out of decades, if not centuries, of misinformation, ignorance, prejudices, and suspicion. If you read the history of some of these conflicts, look at the Holocaust, the persecution of the Jews, for hundreds of years. It goes back to ignorance, prejudices, and prejudice that is fueled by ignorance about a people. Then lead to suspicion, rumors take over, demagogues manipulate people's ignorance. That's what Hitler did. That's what Milosevic did in Balkan, and that's what happened also in Rwanda. So what is important is through education, starting in kindergartens, in elementary schools, high schools, universities, we try to convey, offer people a better education, better understanding of the very rich and diverse societies, cultures that make up this humanity. And that's the only way. I have a program in Timor-Leste, a monthly program, televised, an hour and a half, called The Road to Peace and National Unity. It is pre-recorded throughout the country. The latest one a few days ago was in a remote village, and to hammer on again and again the theme of peace, of tolerance. And what is my concept of peace, as I explained to our people, our youth, in some of the troubled areas? It's not only obviously absence of war, we all agree with that, but it's also absence of domestic violence at home. A home has to be a sacred place where the most vulnerable, the weaker, the women and the children feel safe. There has to be peace in school. When a child leaves home, going to school, he or she has to feel that the streets are safe, friendly. And he or she is going to a school that is friendly, that there is no abuse by the teachers, no abuse by bullies. And when he or she hear the bell ringing, he or she is excited in going home, because he's going to his or her loving parents. He should not fear the child. When the bell rings to go home, he should not be afraid. In a home where domestic violence is pervasive, the child is afraid of going home. He's terrorized. The home is no longer a safe, sacred haven. But that's not all. I asked the audience when I launched the campaign a year ago, Dili City of Peace. I asked the audience, and who were the audience? The audience were not well-dressed academics, diplomats, intellectuals. The audience were mostly barefoot people, some members of rival youth groups, gangs. I asked them whether any of them had helped a blind person cross the road, or whether any of them had invited an elderly person, poor, starving, sitting on the roadside, into his or her home, offering a meal, sharing a meal. And I tell the people, although we are still a poor country, but because of oil and gas revenues, and we have had several years now, 3 years of almost double-digit growth, economic growth. Ironically, we are beginning to have thousands of illegal migrants from China, from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, some from Vietnam. And as I drive sometimes myself around the city and I look at some faces that I know they are not East Timorese, distinctively you can recognize that person is from Bangladesh. And he had a food stall, and I start thinking about the village where he left, leaving behind the family with the illusion, the dream of earning a living, send money back home. And I talk about this issue because there is some rumblings in our communities about foreigners taking over a job. And I tell them, I have not seen a single foreigner taking over a job from anyone. I never saw a foreigner grabbing the broom of a street cleaner and telling the Timorese street cleaner, this is my job. Usually around the world, migrants, foreign migrants, create jobs. They don't take over anybody's job. And I give the example of some of the greatest countries in the world. They are built by migrants. The United States is one of them. Australia, who knew Australia 30 years ago, and who knows Australia today? What an extraordinary transformation in the way Australian society begin to absorb, accept, respect people from many Asian background or Africa. I was very impressed a few years ago when I was in Melbourne. I met the then mayor of Melbourne. He happened to be an ethnic Chinese, first generation from China, speaking English with Chinese accent. He would never have been elected mayor in Melbourne 30 years ago, particularly with that accent. So that's positive transformation in that country. And that's the examples I give to our people, to embrace foreigners who have the illusion, the dream in coming into East Timor, because they will with us build the country. I was in a little island off the capital called Atauro, and I was told by the local police, who were a bit confused, what to do with some Indonesians from neighboring islands, very distant from Indonesia, from Jakarta, or from any urban center in Indonesia, very distant from medical centers, coming into that poor island of ours, often seeking medical help, without passport, obviously without visa, often without even a single identity paper. And I told the police, the people there, and I repeated in English so that some of the UN police on the island as well would understand my message. And my message was, whenever, every time there is a human being landing on our shores looking for help, we provide them shelter. Ask questions later. And I said, probably I was violating our own immigration laws, and I said, as the president of this country, I'm ordering you to welcome these people. And this is pedagogical, educational. And this is part of the process where we educate our communities, our societies, our people. And that's the only way, the only road towards lasting peace in our countries and in the world. And engagement in peace, in building peace in a country or in a region in the world is a mission only for people with patience. There are no shortcuts, no instant solutions to conflict. Our country, Timor-Leste, is one such example. We had a civil war in 75, brief, only a few weeks, followed by 24 years of occupation, during which it was not only the Indonesian army that committed barbarities. East Timorese committed barbarities on each other. In 99, consequence of changing regional and international environment, the Asian economic financial crisis in 97, 98, and because the Indonesian people were not motivated to support the occupation of Timor-Leste, the new president, B.J. Habibie, decided to accept a referendum arranged by the United Nations, and upon announcement of the result, there was some violence, but Indonesia left the country through negotiations with the United Nations and ourselves. They did not leave a defeated army. They left through dialogue, through negotiations. Today we have the best possible relationship with Indonesia, and Indonesia has been one of the countries that most support our membership in ASEAN. Indonesia has even assigned a senior diplomat now for 3 years, working with our foreign ministry to prepare our accession to ASEAN. Indonesia, with other ASEAN countries, supported our membership in ARF, ASEAN Regional Forum, since 2005. We are already participating in many sectoral meetings of ASEAN. Hopefully, with Cambodia's support and other ASEAN countries' support, in 2012 we will join ASEAN. But this would not have been possible, this level of relationship with Indonesia and with ASEAN countries, if following Indonesia's departure from Timor-Leste, and I emphasize the word departure, to say they departed. They were not kicked out, they were not defeated, they left through negotiations. And if we had pursued what some advise us to do, some friends in the international community, the establishment of an international tribunal to try all the crimes of the past, where would be Timor-Leste today? Not only in our relationship with Indonesia, but internally. So in 1999 we decided to look forward and let the past belong to the past, honoring the victims, respecting the victims, look after the survivors. That's the obligation of the new state, and that's what we are doing today. We have programs like direct cash transfers to the poor. Today, every elderly person aged 60 or handicapped or vulnerable every month get $30 cash, payable every 6 months. These on top of programs to support veterans, widows, orphans, and we are not asking Indonesia to contribute to it. We are not asking the international community to contribute to it. It's through our own budget, which is 100% self-funded from our petroleum fund. Today, Timor-Leste does not have one single cent in international budget support. Our budget is 100% financed by our petroleum fund and other domestic revenues. We do have close to $200 million in foreign assistance, but that's for development assistance, controlled mostly by the donors themselves on projects that they identify with us. Whether these $200 million a year have a direct impact on the lives of the people, it has been a matter of controversy, of debate, of disagreement. Cambodia is no stranger to this controversy and to this polemic, or Afghanistan, or Iraq, or many other countries in the developing world that for decades receive foreign aid, and yet after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, the result is there. Poverty still pervasive in many countries. If poverty has reduced or eliminating some countries, I wonder whether that was a result of foreign aid or result of the policies of the country in taking matters in their own hands, in changing strategies, investing more in areas that they consider to be priority through their own efforts. It is a matter for the donor community to self-examine. My point is to go back to the issue of how to build peace. Domestically, we had to tackle in many, many fronts. When I took office as Prime Minister, in the midst of the crisis, I was asked to take over as Prime Minister. In a speech to our National Parliament, I said I refuse to sign a new order that was brought to me to pay for new weapons for our defense force. And I said this country does not need more weapons. We need more computers, we need more on education, maybe we need more Bibles. We don't need more weapons. I was also made Defense Minister, a position that I felt utterly uncomfortable about. I started imagining friends of mine, particularly former President of Costa Rica, Oscar Arias, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, who for many years advised me that Timor-Leste should not have an army. And I thought, God, now how my friend Oscar back in Costa Rica is thinking. Not only they have an army, he became the defense minister. So, but as defense minister speaking in the parliament, I said, I see my role not as a typical defense minister. I see my role more as a chaplain of the army and of the police. And what I meant and what I did, and that is to heal the wounds within the police force, within the defense force, between the two institutions and between them and the people. Because the two institutions literally broke down and the people were afraid of them. Today, in end of 2008, when the International Republic Institute did a survey on the mood of the country, more than 75% said the country was in the right direction. The police force had an approval rate of 82%. The army had an approval rate of 79% or 75%, I don't recall. What a dramatic change from that time. And that required a lot of dialogue with the communities, engaging the communities. When I go to the communities and speak about this Dili City of Peace program, I don't lecture them only on academic concepts of peace. Define what is peace, as you hear academic papers after academic papers, preachers after preachers talking about the same thing. You empower the poor, empower the gangs. I challenge them. For instance, one project is you are going to build homes for the poorest in your own midst. My office provided building material, small cash for work, and the gangs build homes for the poorest. It takes them 1 month to build a simple home, but who benefit? I tell them, with them I discuss who would fit the criteria of being the poorest in the neighborhood. And they agreed with the criteria. Someone who sleep under the stars, so mean no roof, and on the wet floor. And they are the ones who identify the poorest and build the homes. And we did dozens in the city and continuing this year. So give them a new sense of life, new pride, dignity. And that's what we have to do. At home, in schools, in communities, and around the world. If we are not able to build peace in our own home, in our own village, in our city, in the country, we cannot build peace in the world. And last but not least, I would like to share with you also one unique opportunity today for Asia to take center stage, leadership role on the issue of climate change, sustainable development and poverty eradication. Following the Copenhagen debacle, I probably was the only president in the world who didn't show up in Copenhagen. Back in June, speaking in Geneva at a conference hosted by Kofi Annan, former Secretary General, I had anticipated the failure of Copenhagen, and I enumerated the reasons why it would fail, and tragically, this is what happened. In February, I traveled to Maldives and met with President Nasheed of Maldives, one of the most vulnerable countries on earth, one of the first to be swallowed by rising tide if we don't stop global warming. We discussed the problems arising leading to Copenhagen and whether there will be any change by the time we get to Cancun. Unlikely. So we propose in a joint initiative, Timor-Leste and Maldives, that we are discussing with some key countries in Asia, is that this is a time for Asia to play center stage leadership. Asia is home to almost half of the world population. Not only it has the right coming from these huge demographics, but because of that it also has responsibility to contribute towards eliminating poverty, illiteracy, and preventing further deterioration of our environment. 30 or 50 years ago, Asia could talk in the many UN fora like G77, but like in many third world gatherings, we can talk, issue statements, but without much credibility because it is not backed with political will and finances. Today, Asia, containing half of the world population, 60% of the poor, but also holding the largest cash reserves in the world, should first time ever show leadership on this issue. My proposal is that I do not believe that in this multipolar world, only a few years ago we are talking about unipolar world dominated by the US after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But soon after, emerging powers asserted themselves. China, Brazil, India, South Africa and others, these emerging economies. And the power is already diluted in international conferences. That's what we saw in Copenhagen. And China, India and other countries have the legitimate right to pursue the strategies that they see fit to get their people out of extreme poverty. This is what the industrial powers did over 100 years. We could not have told them 100 years ago, don't invent locomotives, don't dig coal. No one said 100 years ago there will be climate change 100 years from now. The consequences of industrialization is what we see today. But we also harvest benefits, extended life expectancies, and so on and so on. There is a price. But we cannot demand of China, India, and other emerging economies slow down. So what is the alternative? The alternative is each country pledge reduction of emissions as they believe they can. Because no one should question China or question India of their seriousness in reducing emissions. China has done more than any other country. One example, if China had not pursued the one-family policy, one-child policy, 30 years ago, Chinese population would be more than 2 billion today. Imagine the pressure on land, on water resources, and resources from around the world to feed the Chinese needs. But in doing so, and everybody praised them successfully, well, China will harvest consequences 30 years from now of an aging population with greater severity than Japan today. The success of China, life expectancy going up to 80 years, but also lowering productivity 3 years from now because of aging population, will create huge problem. So my point is to say, let's avoid confrontation as we saw in Copenhagen. Let's agree on something that everybody will agree based on mutual trust. And Asia should come up with $100 billion fund, an Asian fund, to address extreme poverty in Asia, illiteracy, investment in renewable energy, reforestation. 20% of emissions in the world are caused by deforestation. And deforestation is caused by human activity, either commercial logging or logging out of necessity because of poverty, because of lack of electricity, lack of gas stoves, and so on. And this initiative, in my view, could signal a new era of cooperation in Asia, where we would see technology exchange of information, of know-how, that would bring China and Japan closer, Korea and Japan closer. And these East Asian economies, together with India, could really change the political climate in Asia. And they would drag along Europe and the United States. That is my final comment, and we have to leave very soon. I better stop here, and thank you all for your attention, your patience, and I'm happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, President.
Could you please explain from your perspective what has been the change in viewpoint of the Australian government when they didn't provide support to your cause in 1975 and then decided to wholeheartedly support your perspective later on in 1999? Could you, from your view, what are the reasons why they changed their opinion?
Australia changed when Indonesia began to change in 1999. As I said, following the economic financial crisis in Indonesia in 1997, 1998, Indonesia itself draining its resources in Timor, internationally embarrassed, and Timor was not of major strategic consequence for Indonesia. So they made a wise decision to start planning to leave, and that's when Australia also changed its position. The same went right like United States and all other Western countries and most of the international community. But I think, in fairness, without being accused, particularly ironically accused of being over generous in my interpretation of the attitudes of countries, well, the reality in the 70s, there was hardly any information about Timor-Leste. The invasion of Timor-Leste took place in '75, at the height of the Cold War, post-Vietnam. And there was real fear in Canberra, throughout Southeast Asia, in Washington, Europe, of the domino theory. Those of you who are in Cambodia, in Southeast Asia, you know very well the events of '75. So Timor-Leste was a footnote of the Cold War. The difference is we did not give up. And for the following a quarter of a century, we mobilized world public opinion and never engaged in extremist violence. Not, I have to say, in our struggle, 24 years, 200,000 people in my country lost their lives, out of a population of less than 800,000 in '75. But not one single Indonesian civilian was killed by our forces. Not one in 24 years. Not a school teacher, not a peasant, a shop owner, the wife of a military. Not one. I don't know of how many struggles, situations in the world where not a single civilian was kidnapped, abducted, and killed. So because of that, we won international sympathy. And we didn't win militarily. The guerrilla force was symbolic, highly revered by the people, but could not change the equation on the ground. Today we have the best possible relationship with Australia. We still have some disputes over oil and gas. The Australian side wants a pipeline to go to Darwin. The government, government and the oil people, they seem to follow this all roads lead to Rome. In the Timor case, in the pipeline case, they seem to say all pipelines must go to Australia. Well, we just disagree a bit on that, but that still is not an impediment to the excellent relationship we have with Australia. Move forward, no to an international tribunal. We did a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission that worked 4 years, heard thousands of testimonies, and then in 2005 we established a joint commission with Indonesia, the first time ever anywhere in the world where two countries in conflict agree on a joint truth commission. Limited mandate, at the time criticized, skepticism. The United Nations refused to cooperate because they said does not meet international standards. There were 5 commissioners appointed by the Indonesian president, 5 commissioners appointed by us, among top scholars, former judges. They worked 3 years and produced a report that in the end, even the UN say it was transparent, it was credible. The Indonesian army accepted the responsibility because the report, the joint report, blamed the Indonesian army as an institution. So with that, we decided to close the matter. And so we oppose International Tribunal, not Truth Commission. The Indonesian side, on their own, their parliament a few years ago, passed a law creating an Indonesian National Commission of Truth to look at the violence, history of violence going back to, I think, all the way to the 50s and 60s. But not much happened since the creation of that National Commission. As the Indonesian Foreign Minister himself told me, Dr. Hassan Wurejuda, a few years ago, he said, we Indonesians have to look at our own history, face the history of the violence of the past. And that's what have been our belief. The Indonesian side, they will be the ones, as the society evolves, democracy evolves and consolidates, they are the ones who will tie their history. But in their time, their agenda is not going to be East Timor to push them, and should not be the international community. So, and this is what we are doing.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, in light of this question about international tribunal, which was not something that Timor has wanted to pursue. There was, of course, the High Court Tribunal that was established, the Serious Crimes Unit, between the national government of Timor-Leste and the United Nations, and which was then ended in 2005, I believe. I wanted to ask your personal opinion on this unit and how you felt about this process and your feelings on the role of justice in peace in general.
It was never a joint Timor in UN. It was a UN serious crime unit, serious crime panel established in Timor, not Timor and the UN. After independence in 2002, the United Nations in 2003 transferred all the reports and responsibilities to our Dili National Court. I personally never agreed with that serious crime unit or panel. Consistent with what we believe, that after 1999-2000 we must look forward, particularly when we have to deal with so many challenges, including normalization of relations with Indonesia, securing our borders, healing the wounds among East Timorese, create state institutions, create jobs, and then we have to, with the UN dumping on us what they didn't finish, well, it was most unfair. And and sometimes I don't understand. Today some talk about international tribunal. Well, the UN was the exclusive administering power of Timor from 1999 to 2002. The UN administrator in Timor he had executive, legislative authority. Why didn't he or the Secretary General go to Security Council and say, we should establish an international tribunal? They didn't, because they also know about politics. Later, after they left, they start criticizing the Timorese judiciary for not being strong on justice.
On climate change, you said that developing countries, such as China, shouldn't be restricted by terms of international pressure. But I was wondering, although I'd like to agree with you, where do you think these countries, when they're supposed to curtail the emissions to the extent they feel they're able to?
And we all got used to this practice that you can achieve things only through coercion, through international binding agreements. Two, the classic approach in multilateral conferences no longer working today, because power is so diffuse, and particularly when you have economics at play. Well, President Barack Obama, he went to Copenhagen empty-handed. Kevin Rudd went to Copenhagen empty-handed. They had no mandate from their respective senates. But somehow the Chinese side appear as the culprit, when we all know, highly unlikely, that Barack Obama will win his next battle, climate change, when he already ordered offshore drilling. And so, my approach, my feeling is that you will get more from countries like China and others if you give them the possibility, the chance, and you challenge them, actually. If you tell the Chinese, you will announce you will pledge what you believe consistent with your development goals, your needs, your limitations. You will see the Chinese pledging well beyond Copenhagen. You will see different countries trying to outdo each other who is going to pledge more in terms of emission reduction. Because the Chinese are serious about it. What they don't like is another intrusive international verification mechanism. Second, we would have in our proposal, we would have a different kind of international verification mechanism. That would be every 6 months, every year or 2 years to be decided, ministerial level or expert level meeting in which each country report to the conference what they have done, what they have not and why, what are their needs, their requirements. And then everybody say, okay, Timor-Leste was not able to plant 10 million trees. Why? And we are going to help. We put the resources, fast-track approach, not layers of bureaucracy of the UN or the European Union. It will be fast-track to address the needs of the developing countries. I believe that because what matters is what is the goal, what we will achieve in terms of improving international climate environment, not the formalities of a multilateral conference. And if we can achieve this way, well, this is what we want. So that is our attempt at exploring a new way how to overcome the obstacles, the divisions in Copenhagen. If there is no other avenue, it's going to happen again, a failure again in Cancun. So that's why little me is timid. I flew to Maldives, met with President Rashid, put forward to him the idea. He enthusiastically embracing. Now we are talking to different partners in Asia. I was in Japan, met with Prime Minister Hatoyama, more than 2 hours with him. He sounded very interested. President Rashid is going to Korea and China in the next weeks or so to discuss with them. And maybe we will succeed in finally Asia take center stage, leadership in doing something consistent with its population, consistent with its resources and responsibilities, and in a creative, constructive fashion. Yes, becoming a serious issue in my country. I'm not a judge, obviously, I'm not a prosecutor, so I cannot obviously talk about specific cases. But in the last week or so, I have taken 2 initiatives. Besides the existing new national mechanisms like the Anti-Corruption Commission, the role of the Prosecutor General, etc., etc. A week ago, I called into my office the prosecutor, the Deputy Prime Minister who is responsible for governance. I called in the new Anti-Corruption Commissioner and the Ombudsman, and I told them I would like to see a report by November, December this year on the following areas. And they agreed with that. A few days ago, I called again the prosecutor to my office and I argued with the prosecutor. A judge can order the detention of someone who is accused of a homicide or some major crime. She said yes, the judge can do that if there is strong circumstantial evidence, can order the temporary detention, preventive detention. And then I said to the prosecutor, if that's the case, couldn't a judge order the preventive detention of an individual accused of corruption? She said yes, it could sustain in court. I gave her the papers. I said, I have here evidence that these monies on the budget that was allocated to fix the road that I have just been to, that village where I take my monthly TV program, more than $1 million on the budget allocated for that particular road, and zero was done. And I told prosecutor, that is the crime, the scene of the crime. The road is there, no one did anything. This is evidence, the money is there, it was transferred. Yeah, we do have these kind of problems, and we have to fight. I have to say, in fairness, ministers are such largely exempted. It happens at the bureaucratic middle level. Because ministers, most of them are naive. The bureaucracy has been there for years and years in a culture of corruption. They are the ones, and there are many ways of doing corruption. Overcharging the state. The minister who sign off authorization for payment doesn't even bother checking whether that price corresponds to a market price. A laptop that normally costs a bit over $1,000, the government usually is charged $3,000, and so on and so on. So we do have this problem.
Got their independent, right? And in the year of 2012, you prepared to be a member of ASEAN. So what are your preparations or some of your strategy in order to show other ASEAN members that you are capable enough and you are potential enough to be their member?
Very good question. Yes, you point to a very, I say, real issue. The ASEAN countries as a whole have agreed that Timor should join. We are eligible through geography. The amendment to the charter, ASEAN charter, already has a clause opening the door for a new member. Up to then, it referred to 10 countries, and that's it. But the amended, bearing in mind the possibility of Timor joining. But as I have said recently, a few weeks ago in meetings with many colleagues in the government, I said, we will be able to join in the target date we have imposed on ourselves, 2012, only if we maintain the current peace and stability in the country, that we continue to show economic growth. Peace and stability and economic growth. Otherwise, why would ASEAN countries want another problem? Don't they have enough? So I say, they would be quite unwise to welcome Timor-Leste if we are silly enough, irresponsible enough, and fight each other. And the country is completely mismanaged. I personally wouldn't have the audacity to seek membership in ASEAN. So the challenge is to us. We are now in a 3 years period of stability. No political violence, not even political tensions, criminality very low, double-digit growth. If we keep this, yes, even countries very pragmatic like Singapore, they would say yes, Timor-Leste is welcome. But if we become a political mess and economically basket case, in spite of oil and gas, if you look at the Economist booklet 2010, the pocket book, you will see a striking figure there. Timor-Leste appears #1 in the world in terms of budget surplus against GDP. 300% budget surplus. Second, Libya with only 30%. United States minus 300% deficit. So, we had a meeting just a week ago in Dili, 3 different set of meetings, international gathering. It's called the Dili International Dialogue. 40 countries participated, including so-called fragile countries, from Afghanistan to Liberia, Sierra Leone, Congo, Timor-Leste, etc. In my opening remarks, improvised and not official, I was surprised that President Barack Obama was not in the meeting. I understood because he was in Prague signing the nuclear arms reduction talks with Russia, But I thought President Barack Obama should have been in a meeting with us because of U.S. huge deficit. Right now, there are two countries financing U.S. deficit, China and Timor-Leste. We have billions of dollars in U.S. Treasury bonds. Okay, that was, I was joking with the U.S. ambassador was sitting there. I knew President Barack Obama is a wonderful human being, doing great things. He was engaged in much more important things than coming to our little capital. But anyway, as I said, I'm hopeful, I'm confident we will maintain peace, stability, economic growth, and we will be a proud, constructive addition to ASEAN, not a burden, not an embarrassment.
What do you think, so, considering that Timor-Leste and Cambodia have remarkably similar histories in some ways, what do you think about the different trajectories of development since coming out of wide-scale conflicts and similarities and differences and concerns?
So could you repeat the question?
Compared Cambodia to Timor-Leste, their different trajectories after conflict, what would you see as the differences and similarities?
Cambodia and Timor-Leste. Well, we have tragic similarities. The genocide in Cambodia, a victim of the Cold War, the Vietnam War. You remember the book, I think, William Shawcross, Sideshow. It was William Shawcross, I believe, at that time. And Timor-Leste, a similar situation. And I'm not very familiar with the situation in Cambodia, except what I read in newspapers. Stability, impressive economic growth. This is my third visit. Last visit was 7 years ago. Just flying over, you see the impressive changes. So, without knowing much of the details. For that, I'm impressed and commend the people of Cambodia for that. Timor-Leste is much smaller. The consequences of the occupation were devastating. The human toll, psychologically, psychically, is profound. But we are lucky. On the day of our access to independence, May 20, 2002, we signed the so-called Timor Gap Treaty with Australia. By 2005, we began to receive oil and gas revenues. And then, with God's help, oil revenues price went up over $100, and our petroleum fund skyrocketed. It is with these resources that we are able to finance our current development, reaching double-digit growth in the last 2-3 years. The difference that we are on the fringes of Southeast Asia. Cambodia is very much in the center of. So geography counts a lot when you establish trade and with other countries. We are not as bad as the Pacific Islands that are even thousands of miles away from, but still we are not that close to Singapore, for instance. So these are some of the differences. We have a very free, dynamic media. We have a multi-party political system, 9 parties in the parliament, 30% are women, the deputies. We have several, I lost count of the radio stations we have. Almost each town has a radio station, community, totally uncontrolled by the government. Our media probably is the institution that is least controlled by the government. They take pleasure, pride in every day attacking the government, sometimes even outrageously making up complete stories. And the Vice Prime Minister told me yesterday in the plane, he was traveling to Singapore, he said, they made up a whole interview with me, attacking my own government. And he said he had to write to them, so please publish what I'm saying here, that I didn't give any interview to you. And yet we still think, yes, even this very irreverent and sometimes irresponsible media is better than having no free media at all. When some criticize our media for being incompetent or irresponsible, I say, well, and we government, are we terribly competent? Well, we are all learning. The media is learning, so I excuse them for some of the blunders they do. Some in a very mischievous way, others out of inexperience. So we have this experience in my own country. I wish we would have the political stability of Cambodia. Maybe now we have it the last 2-3 years. I wish we would have we wouldn't change prime ministers too often. In my country the other day I said I will run again in 2012. I will run in 2017, 2022, 2027. So by the time I want to be like Fidel Castro, being president of my country. I'm joking. I told, and the people laughed because they knew I was joking. My term ends in 2012, and I would say I have had enough. We have stated consistently for 3 decades that Timor-Leste was never part of the so-called Dutch East Indies. The strength of our argument, diplomatically and under international law, was that East Timor, colonized by Portugal for 500 years, was never part of the Dutch Empire. Therefore, Timor-Leste was not part of the so-called successor state to the Dutch East Indies, which became Indonesia. Irian Jaya, West Papua, was part of the Dutch East Indies, fall within that jurisdiction. And this is what was accepted all over the world, following the colonial boundaries. So this is the difference historically and under international law. Whatever problems exist in West Papua, no different probably or less in violence than Aceh, I believe the Indonesians will be able to resolve. A few years ago, 10 years ago, very few people would imagine a solution to the Aceh problem. They did settle the problem. And today Aceh doing very well after the tsunami, economically and politically seemingly stable from what we read. And I believe with patience on the West Papuan side and the trusting President Widodo, I talked with him a few times, and without me putting any questions on West Papua, he was the one who volunteered, saying he will do his best to also to address the problems there. So that's how we see the problem.